before you record, I was.
Too late, recording in progress. Your voice will be recorded forever. Yes.
The reason why I'm just thinking about recording these classes, it's fine. But I was just feeling because it's kind of for our Sangha thing, whatever rubbish I talk.
No, it's not rubbish. It's Krishna guitar.
I know, but I don't. I'm not so.
Well, we can keep it. We can keep it. Well, the recordings is available amongst ourselves for our reference.
Yes, I don't. Yeah, because that's why sometimes I don't put it sending on the group. I just want it for those who want to, because like this book we're reading, not everybody wants to join. Not everybody wants to read. So I'd rather keep it with those who are interested and who want to read, and who, if they miss it, they want the recording. Just to send it to just those.
You mean you don't want to be a YouTube star?
I don't want to be no star. I just want to be learning. So I'll be asking, the questions I ask at the low level and things like that. I am not so intelligent.
No, I think you'll be quite nice. Put them in YouTube. You could be famous.
I no.
All right, well, let's just see how it goes. Let's just see how it goes.
It's for our benefit, and that's what I'm feeling. I just don't. Otherwise,
I know.
Okay, well, let's see how it goes. Anyway, I'm going to record. I am recording from now on, and I'm going to have the recording. And I'm going to
that's fine. You can send it to.
So if you missed part of it or something you want to go back on, and does this group have a WhatsApp group? Are you all on one WhatsApp group or?
Yeah, we got two. One is the mentee one, and one's our Sangha.
So like if I send a link to the YouTube vid, then Chandravali can send it to all of you. So you can have it there.
That's the point. I don't want to send it to everybody.
No, then you can select just those who are part of this reading who are not present for one reason.
Yes, that's what I want.
Because
even in our mentee group or Sangha group, not everybody wants to join this group reading thing.
Yeah.
So I want to only keep it for those who are interested.
Yeah, fine. So then you can choose who you might send it to. Okay. All right. So let us offer pranams to Srila Prabhupada before we begin. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Dastaya Gopalation Ati Bhakti Vedanta Santi Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachalane. Nivasisha Sunyavadi Kashtakara Sakarine. Hare Krishna. So novel. So we are on page 77. The chapter is chapter 4, part 1, Sadhakas and their spiritualization, page 77. And interestingly, Maharaj up to this point has not actually spoken directly on the subject of sadhakas and their spiritualization. It actually starts from here, page 77. We'll start to describe it and the different stages of devotees and what levels and to what degree they are spiritualized to become transformed. That's the object of our Krishna consciousness. We want to become transformed. We want to become spiritualized. So we'll start speaking of it here. So those of you who have copies with you, that's Chandravali, Sahachari, Suniti Priya. Who else is out there who has a copy? Or those who like to read. Perhaps we can do as we and once you are. Okay, anybody else, if you like to read, just make yourselves known. Let's see how far we get. So let's just start perhaps with Sahachari Mother. You can start.
Thank you.
Page 77 and
hierarchical divisions of sadhakas and sadhana are essential. 77. The hierarchical divisions of sadhakas and sadhana are essential parts of devotional truths. Like other principles of Krishna Bhakti, they should be known, appropriately applied, and enthusiastically followed. By so doing, a sadhaka will be faithful to Krishna's repeated instructions to recognize his spiritual station and to follow the corresponding devotional recommendations and prohibitions. In 2 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam that begins with the same phrase, Sve Sve Dhikare Yanishta, Krishna says, steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one's position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained. By following the Lord's instructions, a sadhaka can avoid challenging pitfalls and quickly proceed to his spiritual destination. Having described the different kinds of sadhakas, let us briefly examine how the development of devotion purifies their consciousness. This purification is also known as spiritualization and has already been touched upon earlier. At the conclusion of his dissertation on the stage of devotion, entitled Madhurya Kadambini, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur briefly describes the stages of spiritualization that take place in a devotee from the beginning of faith up to the blossoming of Prema. As mentioned earlier, the practice of devotional service purifies a devotee of material contamination and gradually awakens him to his eternal relationship with the Lord. This awakening is called spiritualization. And what is the material contamination that blocks the devotee's path to spiritualization? In short, it is the lingering misconception of I and mine, which will now be extensively described. When abhimana or self-conception is materially tainted, it is referred to a false ego, ahankara, the aspect of conditioned self presided over by Lord Sankarsana. This impure ego falsely suggests that I am the doer, an illusion that Krishna discloses to Arjuna. Thus, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, think himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. False ego has 2 facets, the concept of I and mine, or ahanta and mamata, respectively. In the materially conditioned state, impelled by the modes of nature, one identifies with the material mind and body and thinks himself a proprietor. However, in one's pure spiritual identity, by the influence of Prema, a devotee thinks of himself as Krishna's servant and everything as Krishna's property. That is pure abhimana. Lord Kapila indicates that spiritualization or purification of false ego takes place in proportion to the strength of devotional service practiced. In that opposition of self-realization by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence and the material influence act less powerfully upon him. Spiritualization then is the extent to which a devotee has become freed from the concepts of ahanta and mamata. Let us now examine the relative degrees of purification as described by Chakravarti Thakur. There are 5 stages through which spiritualization of bad habits takes place. These stages are partial spiritualization limited to 1 or more habits, pervasive, partial spiritualization relating to many or all bad habits, almost complete, spiritualizing the best part of all bad habits, complete, completely purifying all bad habits, and absolute, eradication of all bad habits with no chance of recurrence. Let us now study that stage by stage spiritualization, beginning with pre-devotional life and concluding with Prema. In the conditioned state, the 2 aspects of ahankara are embedded in material conceptions, and thus both ahanta and mamata are extremely dense. Indeed, they cover the heart with a Gordian knot of illusion. Even if such a conditioned person identifies with being a Vaishnava, he has no intention of abandoning worldly activities and thus experiences no spiritualization. Lord Rishabha explains this state. The attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female. One becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and think in terms of I and mine.
Okay, perhaps
When-
just pause there. Any questions or comments or clarifications? Yeah. Also, yeah, this verse, a well-known phrase Prabhupada will sometimes say is Janasya ho ho aham mameti. I, me, and mine. Yeah. So the principle here is identifying with the body and identifying the self as being our conditioned self. Yeah. Identifying ourself as being what we're familiar with as a conditioned soul. So I, me, and mine. And I think it's now Maharaj is describing the different stages at which one becomes free of this. Yeah. So in the beginning, it's very dense. The knot is very tight. And Gordian knot, I mean, I came across this last week and I looked it up online. Gordian knot is a ancient mythical story of a knot that was tied and a king was asked to undo it for the sake of a kingdom or something like that. And he couldn't do it. So one intelligent person came and cut it with a sword. Anyway, that's a side point. But any clarifications? Or yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was thinking that sentence, even if such a person identifies with being a Vaishnava and he has no intention of abandoning worldly activities, he experiences no spiritualization. So, so you can be identified. I was thinking that, we might say, I am a servant of Krishna, but it might be all about your ego and less about being a servant. It's very subtle sometimes.
Yeah, I was just looking at that sentence and was just about to repeat it as well. Even if such a conditioned person identifies with being a Vaishnava, he has no intention of abandoning worldly activities and thus experiences no spiritualization. So we could say this is a beginner, someone who's just coming to the fold of Krishna consciousness, just coming into the association of devotees. They may not realize to the extent that they are actually conditioned. Yeah. In other words, covering is so dense that one still very much identifies with their country, with their family, etc. And here, interestingly, has no intention of abandoning.
Yeah, or it could be like offense, like maintaining material attachments even after understanding, but you're identifying as a Vaishnava and you're still maintaining attachments, would it be?
Yeah, you could say that as well. Yeah. Still. And then he quotes the verse from Lord Rishabdev. That Hridaya Grantim is a tight knot. Yeah, and often it comes up in our devotional practice is when we associate with devotees and we engage in various duties in devotional service. Sometimes you see devotees' false ego gets prodded. I remember many years ago, but this is when we're staying at the manor. And Murari, I don't know if you know Murari people.
Yes.
Yeah, we were staying in the
Used to
ashram.
be.
Yeah, he does he's a psychologist now. Very nice devotee. And I forget what it was, but I was mentioning something to him. And he, about something was wrong. I wasn't being heavy, I was just kind of in a light, I was mentioning something that was amiss. And he looked, this was in the bathroom thing. He said, you're getting on my false ego. Get on, no, you're getting on my false ego. So yeah, and perhaps we can, in our own reflection of our own practice, we can see how sometimes we can, the false ego, our identification with our position, or some type of self-identification holds us back or can cause problems. So it doesn't mean once you put on tilak or sari and dhoti and walk into the temple, then it's like a transformation. As soon as you walk through the door, it's as soon as you put a sari on, you get transformed. You put a dhoti on. No, we wish it was that simple. You know? So it takes time. It takes time. Yeah. Anything else on that? Otherwise, we're going to finish the chapter now and go on to chapter 5, which is I think it's the last chapter in part 1. Okay, so I've got here, Chandravali, Mother, you like to take us through to the end of this chapter?
Yep. Okay. When a person becomes a recipient of a ray of faith, Sraddha, then his material conception are stirred and good fortune becomes the source of a trace of spiritualization. And while the association of devotees, sadhu sangha, further nurtures this spiritualization, there is almost no perceptible change in the condition of the false ego, which retains absolute control over the consciousness of a seeker. Since bhajan begins at the devotional stage of unsteady Bhajana Kriya, the 5 stages of purification previously listed really begins from there. However, with spiritualization having just begun and thus still relatively weak, it remains partial. Correspondingly, the false ego experiences minimal effect, remaining complete and prominent, but as one's bhajan becomes steady, nishta, a more pervasive spiritualization takes place, although the false ego stubbornly remains almost complete. With the appearance of taste, ruchi, spiritualization is nearly complete, and although the effect of I and mine has loosened, it remains prevalent. However, at attachment ashakti, spiritualization finally becomes complete with, with all anartha having been purified, although not irrevocably so. Having said that, it is seen that attachment may still be partially tainted by false ego, appearing in certain traits of sadhaka, such as pride of spiritual advancement. Spiritualization is absolute at the transcendental stage of power, indicating that no bad habits can resurface or, for the careful transcendentalist, be acquired. And while false ego has been completely eradicated because the scent of past offenses lingers, it still exerts its shadow, as previously explained. This shadow obstructs a sadhaka in the maturation of his spiritual identity, in the absence of which he is unable to enter Krishna's pastime, even while ardently desiring to do so. Chakravarti Thakur likens the materialistic influence on the bhava sadhaka to the influence of sleep on one who has just awakened. Only at this stage of Prema are all subtle and gross material influences destroyed, never to return. And the spiritualization that was already absolute at Bhav becomes further condensed as ahanta manifests in a perfected spiritual identity, and as mamata is expressed in the conviction that Krishna is the devotee's only possession. Rupa Goswami describes spiritual possessiveness thus. When that bhav softens the heart completely, becomes endowed with a great feeling of possessiveness, mamata, in relation to the Lord, and becomes very much condensed and intensified, it is called Prema, love of Godhead, by learned scholars. As previously mentioned, the purpose of all spiritual practices is to remember Krishna and never forget him. Smartavya satatam Vishnu Vishmartavyo na jatuschit, especially during Nam Sankirtan. However, a lack of spiritualization of consciousness means that bad habits continue to be obstacles in such remembrance. And even when spiritualization becomes complete, in the absence of natural attachment, remembrance may not be spontaneous.
Okay, perhaps just pause there.
Oh,
There was quite a few details there. And,
okay.
yeah, any comments there or questions? You could just go back here. Maharaj gives the stages. We know these stages that Rupa Goswami gives in the nectar devotion. That's Sraddha, then Bhajana Kriya, etc. But then not becomes stirred, but not straight away. Material conceptions are stirred. What does that mean? If you ask you, what does that mean that material conceptions are stirred? Can you give an example of that?
Like you might think, I don't know, maybe someone thinks the universe came from a big bang. And then you hear that actually it comes from Brahma.
Yeah, well, what you're saying is very...
So like you're hearing things that are challenging to your material conception. So it's making them...
Yeah, that's a very, that's a very good answer, actually. Because this is what happens when people seriously and sincerely read Srila Prabhupada's books, and this is what Prabhupada is doing. So someone's got enough faith, at least, to read a book or to hear from devotees, say who are giving a class, and Prabhupada is stirring our material conceptions, our material misconceptions. So yeah, very good. So it's thing to stir things up, and that's what we want to do. We want to stir people's misconceptions about the infallibility of material life. And a trace of spiritualization. How would we describe that? What's a trace of spiritualization?
Is it that they start having some faith in the devotees?
Yeah, you could say that. I would say also that you start to, at least theoretically, you start to conceive yourself or try to understand yourself as not being the body. Yeah, as being a servant. It may be theoretical and it may not be realized, but that's a trace of spiritualization. Yeah. Then as Ramti Bhatt said next, any association of devotees, then they nurture this. They nurture the misconceptions, and they always speaking on this principle that we are not these bodies. You know? We are eternal servants of Krishna, but that, as we're reading, is only really known in its full sense of the term at the stage of Prema. mamata. The one identifies completely as Krishna's servant. There is no identification in regards to a temporary body anymore. It's complete identification with Krishna, service to Krishna, and the Krishna's associates. That's a prema. Yeah.
Can I add like the other, like the first one and the second, like a material conception? Like I feel I'm just thinking to myself, have you kind of up to then you kind of attached to material things, right? So then reading a little bit or being in associated what your sort of material things start stirring, you start
Yeah, yeah.
thinking, right? So then a trace of spiritualization. So then you kind of start like bits of spiritualization comes in, you know, you
Yeah,
start thinking a little bit differently. So it's one is mixing with the second one.
yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so this is the beginning of becoming
Yes,
spiritualized.
beginning of your spiritual life, you know.
Becoming spiritualized.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned last time as well when we touched on this subject that it's one of the things which I like to see over the years in the temples when a new devotee joins or someone starts to begin to associate with devotees. You can see the spiritualization that's beginning.
Coming up.
Yeah, you can see it. And even it seems, even very much, it seems like their physical body changes. Their physical, even the features of their physical body become more, again, I can't explain it, they become more devotee-like and their subtle body begins to change. I think as I mentioned as well before that, then it sometimes works the other way when you see someone leave the association of devotees, you know, and perhaps go wayward from the principles, and then you see them again, and you can see it's gone the other way. The material concept of their features seems to have come back, you know, where they've kind of got entangled in the material energy. It's quite perceivable, you know? And then, so the next one is Bhajana Kriya we described. So it really begins from here. So it's pretty, still, it's partial. So there's two types of bhajan, steady and unsteady. The steady becomes more pervasive. Though the false ego stubbornly remains almost complete.
Muli Prabhu, can I share something?
Please, yes.
I just had a realization while we were reading through this section that Maharaj is very nicely explaining how the false ego in the very beginning, although there's some degree of spiritualization happening, but the false ego is very stubborn, still there, and it's almost complete, he says. And then this kind of explains, or maybe kind of makes us realize also as those who are help in our service to help others who have just come to devotional life, how we have to be often tolerant and very compassionate when encouraging them, because the false ego is still stubbornly there.
Yeah, very good point.
I mean, it's almost complete, and it's like often it's like you're banging yourself against a brick wall sometimes. Why aren't they changing? But of course they won't, because now Maharaj explains the science behind it, that the spiritualization is relatively weak at the stage of unsteady bhajan. Even though they're practicing, if they're unsteady, it's still going to be quite of a tough job.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Any comments upon that? I just sometimes we become, or you hear of devotees becoming impatient with other devotees for not changing, being the same, carrying the same issues, carrying the same problems. You know? So we have to be compassionate for others, and hopefully we should pray that devotees become compassionate upon us as well for not coming to the standard.
It's true. It is Muli Prabhu, yeah. And the other one, sort of at the end, he says, when the bhava softens the heart completely.
Yeah.
So that's really sort of, it becomes very much condensed and intense, you know, like it's called Prema, love, Godhead. So which is really nice when it's become softer completely, and that's how we realize it, that this is our path and this is what we need to do that for our spiritual path, you know.
So that's when you're going to see some changes. So, but the point Bamsivat's bringing up is very, very valid point, an important point as well. We should be patient with devotees. That's why we should be careful how we deal with younger devotees. I mean, I know in a temple, then it's always generally if I see young devotees doing something wrong, then I never say anything to them, unless they're doing something drastic, like something crazy or drastic. But generally, I don't. I will go to the person in charge of them and say, "Oh, this devotee, this, that," and then because otherwise, the new person joins and they've got people coming to them all day, telling them what they're doing is wrong. You don't clean your teeth like that. You use a bathroom. You don't do this. You don't do that. And when they come out the bathroom, don't sit here. Don't do that. And when they take prashadam, don't do this. Don't do that. When they sit in class, don't do this. Don't do that. And it can give it too much for the false ego. So you have to be a little bit gentle. But also, I think it brings up a deeper point as well. Sometimes you see somebody who may not behave so in a completely Vaishnav-like way, even after a number of years, So perhaps we can essence.
Devotees used to do that to people who just came for the first time to the Sunday feast. They used to say, "Don't sit here, don't do that." And that's like, people were going, "Oh my gosh." So I mean, we've become more tolerant.
Yeah, I think we've become a little bit more experienced of how to encourage people instead of discouraging them. I remember the first time I came to the temple, I was there having a feast for Govardhan Puja, and I'd already ate a big prasad in the restaurant, so I couldn't eat everything for the feast on Govardhan Puja. Mr. Devotee, he chastised me severely for attempting to throw the prasad away. But it was good. I mean, I took it seriously that it's a spiritual food.
Yeah, some people can take it. Some people can't take it. But that's the size of the false ego.
Yeah. So here we're seeing that the false ego hangs around for quite some time,
Yeah.
Hanging around.
I think sometimes, Murli Prabhu, as well, people can't help it. It's the way they've been brought up, and it takes time for them to understand. They haven't been brought up in this sort of environment.
I always like Vaisesika Prabhu's saying, he says, I'm always trying to imbibe that. If somebody corrects me, I've got to embrace it because it's helping me get closer to Krishna.
Yeah. I think you said
sometimes we don't realize what mistake we're making. If somebody, as you said, Labanga Mataji, it's true. Yeah. Very true.
I think he's what he says there, the saying is, I live to be corrected.
Yeah, I love that saying. It's so, when you actually take that in, if you start living that, then you're inviting correction because you think, I do need help. I need help to get back to Krishna.
Yeah, it's a nice mindset. It's a good.
Yeah, I really like it.
Set the mind. Right, so then we got Ruchi, it's nearly complete. So it's loosened. This is the stage of taste, or one's getting a taste. Yeah, but it still remains. Interesting. The Shakti here becomes complete. All anatas are purified, but still they kind of hanging around in the ghost-like form, and they may return. But still partially tinged by false ego. And this is interesting. Appearing, for example, as pride or spiritual advancement. This is mentioned by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. Yeah. So, yeah, because one will be experiencing to some degree, Krishna conscience, especially at the stage of a Shakti. But the false ego is still there, so it can make a mess of things where one becomes proud. Yeah. I think what's it termed in Taranga Rangini? I think isn't it from in Durga Nabini? It means delighting in the waves that come.
Yeah.
They're delighting in the waves that come in the form of adoration and distinction. Because at this stage, one has been around for a few years. But anyway, so then Maharaj quoted a verse in regards to Bhava, which is quoted a lot in this book. Sanyan Vishmita Swanto Mokvaiti Dayantakaha. Yeah. So absolute here. Here it's complete. Here it's absolute. Still, the scent of offenses is lingering. So unable to steadily hear or remember Krishna's pastimes. It's quite sporadic. And Prema, never to return. Hari Bol. Yeah. So here one is completely identifying. There's no more I, me, and mine. So you identify yourself only in relationship to Krishna and his service. You have no other identification outside of that. Yeah. Okay, so and here's that verse: spiritual possessiveness. And here I think Maharaj will then speak of this now. Okay, who'd like to read next? Sunita Priya, you can read.
Yeah. So when as previously mentioned,
81. Just at the bottom of page 81.
Yeah, as previously, or is it only the stage of Prema?
Down below. We
conclude.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. We conclude this chapter by describing the quality of meditation that sadhaka can expect at relevant stages of advancement, as explained in the following verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Remembrance of Lord Krishna's lotus feet, destroying everything in auspicious and awards and the greatest good fortune. It purifies the heart and bestows devotion for the Supreme Soul, along the knowledge enriched with realization and renunciation. When bhajan is unsteady, the meditation of Krishna is an occasional affair, and even then it is mixed with mundane thoughts. When bhajans become steady, then remembers in equally so, but traces and shadows are mundane topics continues, so haunt and sadhika. At the stage of taste, remembrance of Krishna is not only free of distraction, but it's also long lasting. And when sadhika comes to the stage of attachment, his meditation are blessed with depth from which he is roused by someone of something only with difficulties. The meditation at the stage of sadhana are products of the increasing purified mind. However, they differ from the spiritual experience of devotees at ecstasy and love. As soon as bhava sadhaka meditates to the Lord, he appears within the devotee's heart in the way of Narada describes to Vyasa. This is called supurity. This Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, whose glories of activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart is called for as soon as I began to chant his holy activities, and perfected devotees who are attained Prema and its various stages gained in direct association of the Lord. When the external association is temporary, absent, Siddha enters an intense kind of spiritual meditation, which with intensity of ecstasy, challenges even the experience of direct association with Krishna. Thus, we have described different sadhaka and their level of spiritual attainment. We have also described the degrees of spiritualization as a different stage of devotional service. How such spiritualization reduces bad habits and how it dissolves with false ego. And we have touched upon how devotees are able to remember Krishna at different stages of purification, meaning different stages of bhakti. The contents of this chapter, especially Nama Sankirtana, meditation of sadhana bhakti, will be more extensively described in all important 6 parts of this book.
Okay, thank you. So part 6 is entitled Sankalpa and Attentive Nam Bhajan. So there's a few chapters on that. Yeah, it's part 6. So okay, so that completes chapter 4. Any final questions or comments there? So we might be able to honestly see where we are if we look at this here. How is our meditation? We're going to have a look where we are. All right, if there's no questions or comments, we can go on to chapter 5. Okay, chapter 5, which begins at page 85. Knowledge of Sadhana. Vamsi Guru, you could read for us.
Okay. Chapter 5, Knowledge of Sadhana. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srimad Bhagavatam have clearly established Nam Sankirtan as the means for attaining perfection in this age, they also emphasize the study of scripture as an essential means to bring chanting to fruition. We see, therefore, that Srila Prabhupada spent so much of his time in making the cream of Vaishnava literature available to the world. His divine grace further emphasized to his followers the importance of studying his books and distributing them. Of these 2 instructions, studying and distributing his books, devotees in general seem to be more enthusiastic about the latter than the former. Somehow, the importance of reading and studying the Prabhupada's books and the works of our Vaishnava is, for one reason or another, lost on many devotees. And yet, Krishna makes an inseparable link between knowledge of his pastimes and activities and a devotee's ability to gain freedom from bad habits and so attain ecstatic devotion. Vitaraga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita bhavo jnana tapasa bhuta madbhavam agata. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. In other words, freedom from bad habits and the development of attachment to Krishna are very much dependent on knowledge of him. That knowledge is of 3 kinds: knowledge of relationships, of practice, and of perfection, sambandha, avideya, and prayojan. And those 3 divisions of knowledge include, among other things, an understanding of the following truths: Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Prema Tattva Sar, Bhava Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Lila Tattva Ar. The truth of Krishna, the truth of devotional service, the truth of love of Godhead, the truth of emotional ecstasy, the truth of transcendental mellows, and the truth of the pastimes of the Lord. Prior to creation, Lord Brahma was puzzled as to his origin and his destination and the means to attain it. He also did not know how to dovetail his desire to create the universe with service to his own mysterious genesis. As a result, he followed a succinct celestial instruction to perform a ceremony, at the conclusion of which he was able to see the Lord. Of course, being blessed with a vision of the Lord in the absence of Prema is made possible for a devotee in exceptional circumstances. And this was an exceptional circumstance, as there was no one else in existence to teach Brahma other than Krishna. Thereafter, the Lord taught Brahma the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam as a means of enhancing his creative nature while keeping him on the progressive path of pure devotion. The Lord prefaced his teachings, known as the Chatushloki, as follows: Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Jnanam Parama Guhyam Me Yad Vijnana Samanvitam Sarahasyam Tadangam Cha Grihana Gaditam Maya. The personality of God has said, knowledge about me as described in the scriptures is very confidential, and it has to be realized in conjunction with devotional service. The necessary paraphernalia for that process is being explained by me. You may take it up carefully. Srila Sridhar Swami, Srila Jiva Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada assert that the word rahasya refers to the perfection of Prema Bhakti, while Tad Anga means Sadhana Bhakti. The sum and substance of the verse is that devotional service in practice and in perfection can only be successful if based on and accompanied by relevant branches of spiritual knowledge. Otherwise both sadhana and sadhya remain unattainable secrets stowed away in the inaccessible regions of the Vedas. In his final instruction to Brahma, the Lord describes devotional service in practice. Etavad eva jigyasyam tatvad jigyasunatmana anvaya vyatirekabhyam yasyat sarvata sarvada. A person who is searching after the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this, in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly.
Okay, perhaps we'll just pause there. Any questions or comments, or someone can say what's the main point here? I think we've heard this a few times, but it comes across quite strongly here. What's the main message that came for you, Vamsi, who's reading this?
You can't get perfection in bhakti unless you educate yourself about what bhakti is, what devotion service is.
Unless you say that word again, unless you
We educate ourselves.
Yeah.
To put it in very simple terms, you can't love somebody unless you know them. So we can't gain Krishna Prema unless you know.
Yeah, Raj also seems to be speaking about also the knowledge of the different stages of devotion as well. And that's one of his main impetuses. I need to mute someone there. Okay, I did that. Yeah, that's the purpose that this book serves, actually. It's going to educate devotees and giving them the fuel to advance through their education, through the stages of sadhana and the coming to bhava. So that's why I found this verse that he quoted in Bhagavad Gita very interesting. I hadn't really looking at it in this context, but here, Vita Raga Baya Kroda Manmana Bhavat Manmaya Mama Pashrita Bhavagam Tapasa Putama Bhavnagata. So being free from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons became purified. And how did they become purified and gain and become free of fear and anger and absorbed in Krishna? How did they become purified? By knowledge of me. Yeah. And thus they attain transcendental love. And then he goes on to explain the different aspects of that knowledge, Sambandha, Abhidheya, and Prayoja.
Yeah.
I think in other words, we can't just have a be kind of vague about. I was discussing with a devotee from Scotland yesterday, actually. We were just speaking about Sankalpa Kaumudi. And sometimes we have a vague idea that if we do what has to be done, at the end of life, we're going to go back to Godhead. You know? A bit like the Christians who, if they go to church every Sunday, they're going to go to heaven. You know? We have to be even a bit more diligent in our practice, you know, and make use of the books that Prabhupada has given us. But these questions come up before as well, so I'll ask the question then. Perhaps someone can answer once you've got someone. So say if we just don't have the aptitude to study, you know, say if we're more happy, like someone may be more happy, you know, filling in samosas, rolling samosas, and they more have an aptitude. They don't have such an aptitude for study. Do we all have to become scholars? Do we all have to become like pundits?
No.
Learn all the different levels of sadhana, and then the different levels of bhava, and then the different degrees of prema. Say if one is not inclined to study that deeply, or what level of study does it require?
I guess it's more like you have to have some connection with transcendental knowledge. Doesn't mean you become a scholar, but you're constantly cultivating that sambandha gyan. So let's say you may not be doing it by actively studying like some devotees may do because of their conditioning. They just naturally gravitate towards study. But if that's not your conditioning, at least you're hearing from those devotees who are studying.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
that knowledge that Krishna's talking about.
Yeah, I think I was speaking of the verse as well. Nasta Preshu Patrishu Nicham Bhagavata Sevaya. Regular attendance in classes of Bhagavatam, as well as rendering devotional service. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
so you.
Sorry,
I was just asking you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just asking. You said who's just doing samosas, doing that. So they must be doing the other things. No, I mean like chanting and other things as well. So that will help them in the spiritual path. Wouldn't they, Muli Prabhu? Am I right or not?
Yeah, that will help. And also, I think we can say if someone like it's a big if someone is chanting at the level of Sudanam, then everything comes, all like knowledge comes. But again, having understood that, we don't want to just lay back and kind of expect that level of chanting to come. We have to make some effort.
Definitely, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's not in all aspects. I mean, in all situations, we need to do that. You know, to focus ourselves, to determination in all, you know, chanting, reading, association, serving the Lord, whatever time we have, we really need to focus that, because that's our goal of our life.
And I think also as well is that, you know, I think as Vamsifat was inferring that someone may be inclined to really, you know, they may be self-motivated to study in detail and to cross-reference. I mean, that's more of a Brahminical type of disposition. One will naturally do that. But then there's another level where like then it's good, like we're getting together, and together we're hearing, and together we're studying, and together we're sharing realizations and sharing thoughts. So that also can endow us with the needed knowledge to advance through the different stages. Yeah. So persons who are doing that, they're much more well situated than someone who's not engaged in at least discussing or hearing from, or discussing together or hearing from devotees who like do study. You know, at least we should be actively engaged in this type of thing, in sharing realizations with devotees and attending the classes whenever we can. So even if, so, and this is mentioned in Sraddha Bhakti-Chintamani, actually, that's why I brought it up as a question, because Maharaj mentions it there as well, and he mentions the point that we don't have to be, it doesn't mean we have to become scholars. Remember that picture I shared with that, a picture, I think, from the 19th or 18th century, where one man is in this library, and it's like ceiling to floor, wall to wall books, and he stood up on some steps getting some books. He's like grabbing 3 books. He's got 4 books under one arm. He's got 3 books under another arm. He's got his glasses down his face, and he's looking at one book, and there's just surrounded by books. So it doesn't mean, I think there he mentioned, it doesn't mean we have to become bookworms. But somehow or another, we do have to have an understanding of the process that we're following. And that's what Marge has mentioned. This is what's been mentioned.
I heard devotees discussing online, I don't know, some thing I was watching, some devotees discussing, and they were saying some people believe that reading the books is so important that it should be part of your vows to your spiritual master to read Prabhupada's books for, you know, an hour every day, apart from chanting 16 rounds. And,
yeah, probably most spiritual masters won't do that. I know some were doing that, but because Prabhupada didn't do it, they got a bit of criticism for that. But
some people are doing it
by making it part of the initiation ceremony. Allowed to read an hour a day. So they might not say it during the Diksha initiation, but most spiritual masters will expect that and want that from disciples. It's becoming more emphasized now. And
the class today, I think you was reading in Prabhupada Lilamrita today. Didn't Prabhupada say that you
yeah, he mentioned someone actually went they went too far the other way. And one sannyasi was preaching we should read 6 or 7 hours a day.
Yes.
Then Prabhupada gave some, he kind of edited that, but it said no. Engage in devotion, preaching, and then 2 hours. Then he mentioned 2 hours actually. Didn't he?
Yeah, one Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, and for those who are so inclined, then they can do more. And it's just hit 7 o'clock. It's 7:03. So perhaps we'll stop there for today. Good to keep on schedule. And we finished up at, where did you finish reading? Let me see what page?
At the end of that verse on 87.
Okay, so
it's not
the space does not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if that was okay with devotees. We covered a few more pages there. I hope we don't feel like we're missing anything by stopping at every page and discussing.
No, this is good.
This is good like this, yeah. We can.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you,
Might just go for it a little bit quicker. Instead of 3 years, it might take 1 year, 2 years.
Correct.
Okay. Now I reckon we probably could take us. Anyway, let's see how long it takes us. A good few months. No rush. Okay. Guess we'll stop there. So tomorrow we have
the Bhakti Chintamani.
To the Bhakti Chintamani, yeah. Okay. So look forward to seeing you then. And for those who want to listen to this again, if they're interested, this time we're gonna save it so you can.
Yeah, just send us the link. Would be nice. Thank you. His Grace Muli Prabhu. Yeah, thank you.
All glory to the Vaishnavas. Thank you for joining us.
All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Rama, 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 Hare Hare.